So yeah, we're going to talk about several different things today with to help you look at your trees, plant the trees better, know what's going on with your trees, and hopefully be able to answer questions if you have your neighbors or friends and family asking questions. So these are some of the helpful websites we have. This first one, that's just our main homepage. The second one is a tree ID. It'll give you thumbnails of trees so you can look at leaves and the shapes of the trees, try to identify it. I think it even gives you like a breakdown, a list of is the tree this or this? No, then it gives this and asks you, so you can kind of key your way through it. Texas Tree Planting. You can go there and it has a tree planting guide to help you pick the right tree that you need in your area, and also gives you tips on planting the tree, which we'll talk about those pretty extensively here in just a few minutes. Famous Trees of Texas. If you've ever been interested in the famous trees of Texas, you can go on there and see what they have. Now, unfortunately, starting around drought 2011, some of these famous trees are no longer with us. But whenever one of these famous trees does finally fade out, they'll try to salvage the wood, and they'll use it to make, depending on how big the tree is, what kind of wood it is, they'll try to make, a desk to go in somewhere, or a table, or even, little chunks of branches. They'll take it and make a bunch of pins out of those. I know, like our director, Tom Boggess, has handed out pins made from certain famous trees to different speakers whenever we have stuff. So, and then this bottom one is Texas Forest Info. That has several apps on there that you can use. One of them is Map My Property, so you can go in there and draw your property out and add different stands of trees in there, or trails, or put your deer stand in there if you know where your deer stand is. There's several on there. One of the more recent ones they added is a Herbicide Selector. So if you're doing some kind of forestry work, whether you're replanting or you're just trying to, control some certain species of brush or tree that you're not wanting, you can go through that selector and it'll work it down to, like, you should use, this. You use this triclopyr, use this glyphosate or whatever. So these are the three sections that we're going to talk about. I think this one goes pretty quick. This is probably our longest one. It's got some videos in it. So for the most part of that one, you'll have a little bit of break to hear me have to talk. But we're going to talk about, if you want to plant a tree in your yard, out in your pasture, next to the street or whatever, selecting that tree, going to a nursery, finding a good specimen to plant. Then, where to plant that tree and where not to plant that tree, and how to plant it properly to give it the best shot at growing and then caring for those trees. Then common urban tree problems. I'm just going to go around. I went around Crockett all in one day and just took a bunch of pictures. I got all these pictures mostly in one day of trees that were having problems, and it was stuff because of what somebody else had done to them. And then we got insects and diseases, and these are nothing. Well, some of them may have been helped along by people, but then insect or disease came in and started attacking that tree. All right, so the first thing, the right tree in the right place. So you want to pick the right tree first, and then where do you want to do it? Where do you want to plant it?
Planting a new tree can be both a worthwhile and rewarding project. Trees provide shade, beauty, help the environment, and can increase property values. Shade from trees can also reduce the energy used in your home during summer months. You can enjoy all of these benefits when you plant the right tree in the right place. Choosing the right tree and the right place is the first important step in any tree planting project. Like any valued project, planting a tree should involve planning, execution, and follow-through. Planning involves evaluating the site to determine the best species for the location. You'll want to consider mature tree size and think about your landscape design, shade, existing structures, wildlife needs, and resources for tree care. In addition to choosing a good quality tree, you need to choose a tree that's appropriate for your climate and soil type. Also, if you plan to complete the project without professional assistance, choose a container size that you know you can physically handle. Be sure the mature tree size is appropriate for the location. It's important to consider that the larger the tree, the more resources it'll need to become established and to survive. Take into consideration overhead and underground power lines, sidewalks, driveways, streets, pools, homes, and other buildings. Avoid planting trees too close together or blocking road signs or intersections. Also, avoid encroaching on a neighbor's property, blocking views, or shading your garden. Where do you want the shade? Do you want a deciduous tree, one that will lose its leaves in the winter, or an evergreen? A deciduous tree is often a good choice. It provides foliage to block the summer sun and bare branches to allow the sun to warm the house in the winter. The benefits of trees are many, but you need the right tree in the right place. Remember these important points. Be sure you allow plenty of space for the tree to grow. Purchase a tree size that you're physically able to plant, or hire a professional to help you. It's important to plan where you want the shade and to think about where your full-size tree will best fit into your site design. For more information, visit the Texas Forest Service tree planting website at texastreeplanting.tamu.edu.
All right, so the right tree, right place. So first of all, where are you going to be planting this tree? Are you putting it like in your yard? Well, if you are, you don't want to, depend on the size of the tree, you don't want to have it too close to your house, or a power line that's maybe coming through. If you got a big property and you just want to plant one out there, a nice big giant spreading oak one day would be good to plant out there. But you wouldn't want to plant that tree, right here where this redbud's planted. So, consider your site. You don't want to have a tree that does well in hardwood bottoms where it's dry, where it's wet a lot of times. You don't want to plant that up on the top of a sand hill. Same thing said, a tree like a post oak that does good up on a sand hill, you don't want to throw that down in a real wet site. So, then look at like around power lines. You never want to plant right up under the power line. We got another slide that'll show this. You don't want to plant right up under the power line, but depending on how close you are from that right of way and being right up under the power line, how far away from there, how big of a tree is it going to be? So the closer you get, the smaller you want that tree. Because if you don't, y'all seen what happens to trees close to power lines. You get that. You got a big one growing right up under it, so they're going to come in and, you see that out in Central Texas a lot, where they have live oaks, and then, the live oak was probably there long before the power line, where they put in a road and they got to put in power, so you're right through that crown of that live oak. But yeah, you got your smaller tree here. That tree's only going to get about 20 feet tall. It's never going to be, give a problem with that power line. But lots of times power companies come through and they'll maintain their right-of-ways. So even if the tree is not going to get that tall, they may, just top that tree. Or lots of times they just come through and they mow anything within their, 30 or 50 foot right-of-way there. So you got a little small eastern redbud right here. You can plant that close to the house. It's usually not going to give you a problem. you have to worry about, are there city ordinances against planting trees between the, the public sidewalk and the curb. They may not allow that, so be sure to check that out before you go through the time and money of buying a tree and putting the tree in the ground and babying that thing for a year, and then they come to and say, it's got to come out. Plant those larger trees away from the house. You don't want to block road signs or just the view at intersections. So if you pull up and you can't see what's coming, that's going to be a problem. Next to the sidewalk or your foundation of your home, those roots can get under there and shift and crack that sidewalk. Little utility transformers, stuff like that where maintenance workers may need to get in and do work fairly regular. You don't want to block that off, or if something like this needs good airflow, you don't want to plant something there that's going to restrict that airflow to come in and that thing overheat and cause problems. You got this big large tree right next to the house. You got these limbs going to be rubbing your roof, or in a storm they break off and fall on your roof. It's over the chimney, so embers could be flying in that tree, and also it's right there next to your foundation. It could give you some foundation problems. So here's the power line thing. So you don't want to plant right up underneath that power line. You want to kind of stay out of their. And if you got any questions, you can call them and say, hey, how far of a right of way do you want us to leave? So you got these small trees right there, within 8 feet of it, and then once you start getting further out, you can start planting larger trees. Like I said, if this tree was right here, that half that tree is going to get cut off eventually by the power company. All right. So next video is selecting the right tree. Not just what species you want. You don't want to. If you want something to kind of shade your home, maybe get you a nice big oak tree or some kind of deciduous tree that's going to shade and plant on the south side of your house. It's going to shade your house during the summertime. Drop its leaves. That sunlight's going to hit your house and warm it up during the winter. Or maybe you're needing something to block that. You got a aspect on your house where it's facing a north wind and there's like an open pasture over on that side. So that wind just comes howling down through the winter from the north, and you can just feel that air coming in through the little cracks in your windows and everything. So maybe you want to put like a evergreen tree over there, so it's green all year long. So it's kind of stopping that wind, giving you a little bit of a windbreak as it's coming in from that north side. But then they'll go through and talk about, you're going to a nursery, how to find a tree that looks like it's going to have the best chance of surviving.
Once you determine the right tree to plant on your site, it's important to pick the best quality tree you can get. So let's get started. When picking a tree at the nursery, there are several important areas to inspect. Examine the root system. Make sure the roots are sound and capable of supporting healthy growth. Check for roots that grow in a circle around the root ball. That means they've been confined in the container for too long. These girdling roots could eventually strangle the tree, so avoid them if possible. But if the tree does leave the nursery with a root ball like this, cut the roots vertically before planting the tree. Pick a tree with a single, strong central trunk or leader. Make sure the tree trunk is free of mechanical wounds from mowers, weed trimmers, or other abuse. Also, check for wounds from incorrect pruning. Be sure the tree has a strong form. Look for branches that are nicely spaced and firmly attached. Finally, check the leaves for good color and make sure there's no obvious damage from insects or disease. Keep in mind that larger diameter trees will need more frequent watering over a longer period to ensure that they are properly established. You'll want to plan transportation to the planting site and handle the tree carefully to minimize shock and to help the tree to thrive. Let's review the key points of selecting a tree. Plan and select the best species and size for your site. Check for a healthy root system. Choose a tree with a single, strong central trunk. Make sure there are no wounds on the tree. Choose a tree with a good shape and evenly spaced branches. Check leaves for good color and no signs of disease. And finally, handle the tree carefully when you move it. Now that you know how to choose a healthy tree, please view the relevant video segment, How to Plant a Tree in Your Yard, or How to Plant a Tree in a Right-of-Way. To find out more specific information about the right trees to plant for your area, check the Texas Forest Service tree planting website at texastreeplanting.tamu.edu.
All right, so they talked about getting the right species, so you wouldn't want to get like a giant redwood tree and try to plant it down here. It might grow, it might live, it might, you know, do okay, but it's never gonna be, you know, a 250 foot tall, 1,000-year-old tree probably. So when you go to the nursery, you're looking for some stuff. You know, the main thing is, you know, yeah, you want this up here to look good, but you want the stuff down here to look good too. So, like I said, pick one that's got a good looking trunk. You don't want something that's already forked right there. As that tree grows, that's just going to be a weak spot, and it's eventually going to split. You know, have a good central leader coming up. You know, have a good looking crown on it. You know, the leaves don't look like they're sick already. Looks like it's been watered good and everything, so it's not wilted. There's no damage right here from lots of times I've seen nurseries where you got potted plants. Thank you. You got potted plants or potted trees, and you know, weeds are going to grow in those pots. You know, so they got to come through and weed those out. Well, you know, I've seen places where it looks like they came through with a weed eater, eating those, cutting those weeds out of there, and then you'll see damage. And you saw in the video there was one that like it had damage right there. Something like that had happened. So make sure, you know, there's nothing obvious up here. Then pull that trunk out of the container at the nursery. If the nursery won't let you pull that trunk out of the container, the root ball out of the container and look at it, I just go somewhere else and buy something somewhere else. Because you don't want it to look like this, where the roots have been there and the tree, you can tell that tree's been in there too long. Because those roots have hit that plastic. They can't go through that plastic, so they turn and start going around in a circle. He talked about the girdling roots. Those just keep growing and growing and just strangle the tree out. I've seen several times where people have planted trees like that, and you know, the tree may have lived for a year or two, and they call me, you know, or I'm just happen to be at their place, and I'm like, well, what's wrong with my tree? And lots of times you go over there, wiggle it, and pull it right out of the ground, and it still looks like you just pulled it out of that pot. So you want some good roots. You know, a few small roots that are just starting to girdle, you know, that's okay. But it don't matter if it's got a few little girdling roots like that just starting, or if they're just starting to get to the edge. You want to, before you plant it, you want to cut vertically down that root ball. You know, 4 or 5 spots around there. Just take some shears or a pocket knife or a machete or a shovel, whatever you got, and just cut those roots. Because if there are any that's starting to girdle, cutting it will force it to turn and start growing out for you.
Nice. There's a lot of split trees around here.
Yeah.
We have one over our house, and I mean, there was a guy that was supposed to come cut it. He never showed up, but it may never fall, but it sure is scary.
Yeah, I'm going to mention this now because I might mention it later in the care of the tree. I've heard people, and even people that work for the Forest Service that have retired for us, say, yeah, plant that tree, and in a few years, snip that top off of it and make it bush out. Don't do that. That tree's not made to grow like that. It's made to grow up straight, put its limbs out. It'll bush out eventually. It'll get limbs out there. When you snip that tree off like that, all those other branches that are forced to come out right there, all that is structural weakness. And places for disease and insect to get in. And eventually, like I said, it's going to split. You know, that something's going to give way right there. And if that's parked over your car, on your driveway, you don't want that to happen.
Right.
So. Alright, so we got 2 videos on this one. A lot of the information of it kind of repeats itself, but there's some stuff in the right-of-way one that's kind of needs to be heard that's not in the other one.
Now that you've selected a healthy tree, let's look at the important points of how to plant your tree. Proper planting is very important and will determine whether your tree will just survive or thrive. Before digging, contact all utility companies. If they are members of 1-800-DIG-TEST, someone will come out and mark your underground utilities. If not, it's up to you to make sure you know where your utility lines are located. Once it's determined that the area is clear, let's get digging. First, clear a circle of any surface vegetation, such as grass, weeds, or ground cover. For a tree in a 5-gallon container, the circle should be at least 3 feet in diameter. Dig a hole 2 to 3 times wider in diameter than the root ball. The hole should be only as deep as the root ball itself. To determine the proper depth, simply measure from the root collar or flare to the bottom of the root ball or container. After digging the hole, remove the tree from the container or burlap. Loosen the roots and remove the nursery stake if there is one. Set the tree in the hole with the root collar slightly above the soil level. Once the tree is set, fill around the root ball with soil from the hole. Mulching is a great way to reduce competition for water and nutrients and can help develop a healthier, faster growing tree. Place mulch 3 to 4 inches deep around the tree, keeping the mulch away from the trunk. For trees in 5-gallon containers, your mulch circle will be a minimum of 3 feet in diameter. As the tree grows, you'll want to expand this mulch circle 1 to 2 feet per year up to 8 feet. The mulch ring helps keep the grass and weeds from taking water and nutrients away from your tree, and will also help protect your tree's trunk from mechanical devices such as mowers and weed trimmers. During the summer, make a bowl with the mulch to hold water. During the winter, flatten and spread out the mulch. Protect the lower trunk using a manufactured tree guard, or make one yourself using a 2-liter bottle. Use a hose set to drip water or a drip bag to slowly and thoroughly water the newly planted tree. To sum up, before you dig, contact your local utility companies to locate and mark any underground utilities. Clear a proper size circle of vegetation. Dig a hole 2 to 3 times larger in diameter than the tree root ball. Remove the container or burlap from the root ball, loosen the roots, and set the tree in the hole with the root collar slightly above soil level. Fill around the root ball, mulch around the tree, and protect the trunk with a tree guard. Finally, whether you consider it the last step of your planting or the beginning of your aftercare, water the tree thoroughly with a drip or trickle method. For more information, log on to texastreeplanting.tamu.edu. Before planting a tree in a right-of-way, first make sure that it's okay to do so. Many communities have strict guidelines, such as a minimum planting distance from water or gas meters and fire hydrants. Remember, if you plant in the right-of-way, you may be responsible for fixing sidewalk damage from roots or providing clearance for pedestrians and traffic. But please don't let this discourage you. If you follow these guidelines, you can have a safe and successful project. Once you've determined that it's okay to plant in the right-of-way, call your utility companies to locate all utility lines. If they subscribe to DIG-TEST, they will have you call 1-800-DIG-TESS so they can mark where the utility lines are located. Today, we'll stay at least 5 feet away from water meters, and will stay away from the location of all overhead and underground power lines. When overhead power lines are present, select a tree that won't be any taller than 20 feet at maturity. When choosing your spot, be aware of your surroundings and avoid encroaching on your neighbor's property, blocking views, blocking traffic signs, or blocking corners at intersections. Once you've chosen an appropriate spot, clear a circle of any surface vegetation, such as grass, weeds, or ground cover. For a tree in a 5-gallon container, your circle should be at least 3 feet in diameter. Dig a hole 2 to 3 times wider than the diameter of the root ball. The hole should only be as deep as the root ball itself. To determine the proper depth, simply measure from the root collar or flare to the bottom of the root ball or container. After digging the hole, remove the tree from the container or burlap. Loosen the roots and remove the nursery stake if there is one. Set the tree in the hole with the root collar slightly above the soil level. Once the tree is set, fill around the root ball with soil from the hole. Mulching is a great way to reduce competition for water and nutrients and can help develop a healthier, faster growing tree. Place mulch 3 to 4 inches deep around the tree, keeping the mulch away from the trunk. For trees in 5-gallon containers, your circle of mulch should be a minimum of 3 feet in diameter. As the tree grows, you'll want to expand this mulch circle 1 to 2 feet per year, up to 8 feet in diameter. The mulch ring helps keep the grass and weeds from taking water and nutrients away from your tree. It'll also help protect your tree's trunk from mechanical devices such as mowers and weed trimmers. During the summer, make a bowl with the mulch to hold water, and during the winter, flatten and spread out the mulch. Protect the lower trunk using a manufactured tree guard or make one yourself using a 2-liter bottle. Use a hose set to drip water or a drip bag to slowly and thoroughly water the newly planted tree. To sum up, make sure that it's okay to plant in the right-of-way. Before you dig, contact utility companies to locate and mark any underground utilities. Clear a proper size circle of vegetation. Dig a hole 2 to 3 times larger in diameter than the tree root ball. Remove the container or burlap from the root ball, loosen the roots, and set the tree in the hole with the root collar slightly above soil level. Fill around the root ball, mulch around the tree, and protect the trunk with a tree guard. Finally, whether you consider it the last step of your planting or the beginning of your aftercare, water the tree thoroughly with a drip or trickle method. For more information, log on to texastreeplanting.tamu.edu.
Alright, so when you're planting your tree, we've already got the tree, brought it home, and one thing I forgot to mention, if you're buying your tree at a nursery or Walmart, Home Depot, sometimes their trees aren't the best at like Walmart, Home Depot. But if you know what to look for, you can still find the good ones there that haven't been picked over probably. If you've got a pretty good distance to drive home, if you're going to be doing 60, 70 miles an hour, you may want to take a tarp or something and wrap that tree, because all that heavy wind and wind burn those leaves, and then when you put it in the ground, it'll look like it's been through a drought already. So just protect those leaves on the way home. All right, so when you get ready to dig, if you don't know if you got any underground utilities there, call dig test. Our office over in Crockett is on the loop, and it seems like every other month somebody's walking through our yard, searching and putting flags. And looks like we're growing, pin flag farm, because there's always flags in there. And once they mark that, I think it's 14 days that they are supposed to do whatever work they're planning on doing around there. So we'll pull the flags up, and the guy come back and be all ticked off, like pull my flags up. So yeah, you marked this thing a month ago. We got to mow the grass. So, but yeah, that's his job. Come out and mark stuff, and just keeping him employed. So once you're sure there's nothing there, you're going to hit with a shovel, because unless you get one of those big 50-gallon container guys, you're not going to be using a backhoe to dig. So you just be using, you know, regular old hand shovel. Dig your hole 2 to 3 times bigger around than the container, because you want to have room here. Loosen that soil up, make it easier for those roots to start growing out in it. Don't go any deeper than, and it's actually better if you have that root collar slightly above the ground. It's better to be higher above the ground than below. If you dig too low and that root collar is below, you know, it's going to be a bowl. Water's going to come in and settle there, and you'll see the root collar. It's that little flare right at the base of the tree, where when it sprouted from its seed and started growing, it comes up, and that's their flare, that root collar. So you can see that. Just make sure it's above ground. Lots of times, that's where if the grade changes, you get soil added to the top of there, or water stands there for a while, you'll start having problems. You'll start getting, you know, some disease issues, or start getting a little rotten, and it'll break and fall over. If you dig the hole too deep, of course, you know, put some back in. Just be aware that soil that you put in under is going to settle. So probably put more back in than you think. You know, if the root collar is sitting that high above the ground, it's probably going to settle back. You know, hopefully right at or just above. But just do your best to not take too much out to begin with. You don't have to worry about that. Don't put any like mulch or fertilizer or gravel in the bottom of the hole to help everything drain better. Just put the same soil right back in the holes. Whatever you take out, put it right back in, because that's what the tree's going to be growing in. Get it accustomed to that. And you don't want to put any fertilizer in there because it could burn the roots. Really, the first year, don't fertilize your first year. Just let the tree grow. Then after that, you know, you can fertilize your yards normal and put some, you know, tree food spikes or fertilizer, whatever, around your tree if you need it. Like I said, you know, dig that hole, cut around the roots, you know, 3 to 5 times or whatever, and even take your fingers and just kind of work those roots out. Just kind of break it up a little bit, get those roots, kind of get them woke up, and sit in the hole, cover it back up, and then the mulch. Now I know all of y'all have seen driving through Huntsville, Conroe, Houston, Dallas, whatever, going along where the city is maintained. Nice, good-looking trees, and then they have the mulch volcano at the top of it, at the bottom of the tree. Don't do the mulch volcano. Keep the mulch away from the trunk. Any of that mulch, if it's touching the trunk, it's holding moisture in. It's going to cause fungus issues. And fungus issues start, you're going to get some kind of disease in there, or it's just going to cause rot, and the tree's going to break off right there. As far as the ring, you can do the ring if you want to around it. I mean, it's not a solid surface. It's porous, so the water's going to, you know, to me, it feels like the water's going to flow through there anyway. But if you want to do the ring, do the ring. If you don't, just, you know, like I said, you know, what do you say, 3 to 4 inches? You have 3 to 4 inch depths of mulch around there. You can put a guard around the base of the tree to help keep from, you know, string trimmers or just lawnmowers hitting it. If you mow your own lawn, no matter how careful you are, you know, you're probably going to wind up hitting your tree, whether it's a little sapling you just built or you already got a nice big tree there, you're probably going to wind up hitting the trunk with the lawnmower or the string trimmer. So if you got the guard there, that's going to help protect that young tree. If you have a ring of mulch around it already, and you're keeping the weeds pulled out of the mulch, there's no reason even to get close to it with the lawnmower. So that'll help protect it. And then as soon as you plant the tree, put your water hose on it. Don't just dump a bucket of water or turn the water hose wide open. Just let it drip. You know, trickle in real slow. What you're doing is that water is kind of filling in all those air gaps that's in the soil that you just put back in. So your roots aren't going to dry out, and it kind of helps start compacting that soil a little bit better. And then just watch it. You know, depends on time of year and how much rain we're getting. You know, you go over and kind of dig around, put your finger in there. If it feels dry, you know, put it back on there and let it trickle for, you know, 30 minutes or so, and then cut it off. Now you can't overwater trees. If you're just watering too much and the soil just stays saturated and wet all the time, those roots don't like that. You can just kind of waterlog it and you can kill a tree. So you just use the finger method. Stick your finger in there. Is it dry? Does it need water? If so, you know, run it. All right, pruning and care. I think this might be the last video.
Now that your tree is planted, you need to provide care and maintenance to make sure your tree not only survives, but thrives. It'll take your tree about 3 years to fully establish. A catchy way to remember the stages in your tree's establishment is: first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, and the third year it leaps. You may not see the changes immediately, but they are happening. For care, let's start with water. Water is probably the single most important factor in the success or death of your tree. During the first growing season, watering is not a choice, but a necessity. Provide water to your new tree slowly by a drip method to minimize runoff. This keeps the water in the area most beneficial to the tree roots. During cooler seasons, you should water your newly planted tree at least once a week. In warmer months, water 2 to 3 times a week. Most areas of Texas require using 6 to 8 gallons of water per diameter inch of tree trunk every week. Drier areas need even more water. In more arid regions, calculate about 10 gallons of water per week for each 1 inch of trunk diameter. Your objective is to keep the root ball moist and to supply enough water to wet the surrounding soil. Remember, these formulas are just guidelines. You may have to increase or decrease the amount of water you apply depending on your local climate conditions, the slope, drainage, and soil types. During the first growing season, fertilizer is not needed, as the tree is still in the sleeping stage. That first season, prune only dead or damaged twigs and branches. During the second growing season, determine how much pruning is needed to improve the tree's health and structure. As the tree grows, your circle of mulch should be expanded by 1 to 2 feet per year, up to 8 feet. As you prune, remember, safety first. Never prune trees within 15 feet of power lines or higher than you can reach. Instead, call a professional. You can find a professional at the website for the International Society of Arboriculture. You can find their site at www.isaarbor.com. When pruning small branches, use a quick action close to the trunk using sharp loppers. When you're pruning larger branches, use the 3-step method you see here. Inspect your tree regularly to determine if any pruning is needed. Keep in mind that topping is never acceptable. If it doesn't kill your tree, it will severely damage the structure and stability. To sum up, the most important part of caring for your new tree is a regular watering schedule. Maintaining the mulch circle prevents your tree from competing with other vegetation for water. Fertilizer isn't needed the first season. Prune only dead or dying branches during the first season. Then prune your tree for shape and structure in the second season. And if you need assistance, call a professional. For more information, visit the Texas Forest Service tree planting website at texastreeplanting.tamu.edu.
All right, so the first year I mentioned, you don't want to prune anything off unless it's damaged already, because the more food factories out there for the tree, the quicker it's going to get its roots established and start growing. So you're looking at, you know, this one's broken off, you know, cut that one off. Maybe go ahead and cut this one off because it's a, you know, another codominant leader there. So you don't want that. You'll wind up with a forked tree and have a weak spot there, and that'll break off. But that's also one that if it's not too bad, you could leave it that first year, let it provide the food, and then prune it the second year. Yeah.
When we got fruit trees, they said cut it to about a third and plant it. Is that different than
The fruit trees are different because you're trying to get as much leaves and flowers on there that's going to get pollinated and form your fruit. So they're different. And fruit trees usually, they're not very tall, so you don't have to worry about that structural issue where it's going to break and fall, on your house or on you or your car. But if you got if this is going to be, a 70, 80 foot oak tree in your yard, all those little structural issues are going to be a problem. Yeah, oak trees are completely different. Fruit trees are completely different. And some of them you prune this time of the year, others you prune this time of the year.
Okay.
I don't have a clue.
No problem.
For those questions, you'll have to call A&M Horticulture and ask them.
Thank you.
But, you want to keep any suckers from coming up down here. You'll see that a lot, like crepe myrtles. They'll try to put those little suckers coming up a lot. Then, when the second year rolls around, you can start pruning that thing to kind of shape it up, make it look good. Kind of get rid of these lower branches, so when you're mowing, you're not having a duck to go around it. Any branches that look like they're growing and kind of coming back in, or they're already rubbing on another branch, keep the best one and cut the other one off. So just and when you do it, when it's a young tree like that, you're cutting little small branches. If you have a pair of shears, not the anvil type that comes down and kind of has a little anvil flat piece under that it's cutting, have some that are kind of like the scissor-like shears, and get right up, not right on the trunk. You can see right there that little swell, the branch bark collar. Get right outside the edge of that, and just a quick snip, and everything should be fine. If you have larger branches, lots of times if you have a big heavy limb out there, you're going to prune off, and you go to cut it all in just one cut. When you get almost through, it'll start falling off, and it'll tear this bark down the trunk. So you don't want that. Insect disease is going to start getting in there, and it's going to be a spot where you're going to probably have rot in the tree later. So what you want to do is do the 3-cut method. So your first one, it says 12 to 24 inches out there. Kind of depends on the size of your branch you're cutting off. If you've got a huge branch like that, you want to kind of probably come in a little closer, because when you do that last cut, you don't want a chunk like that falling off on you. But you come out and do your first cut and go in, a third to halfway the tree branch. Second cut, you go out past that on the top and cut, and when you get the cut through, when it gets to there, it just breaks off, so it doesn't peel that bark down. Then you got this little stub left, and you can just cut it off. Now a lot of people think, when you're pruning a branch, you get as close to the tree as you can. Just cut right down that bark, the trunk, but you got that bark branch collar right there, and sometimes it's hard to see. Sometimes it's real evident. That little ring right around where that tree is growing. I don't think I have. No, I don't have the little diagram of that. But the way this branch grows is the structure of the branch comes in like this, and then you got the structure of the trunk like that. It's just that anchor in there for the tree. Just like when you've seen knots in lumber or whatever, when you're doing that, it's going a different direction. So it's coming into here, but this is kind of the little mechanism the tree has for when it gets damaged to heal itself. It's called compartmentalization of disease in trees. So they call it coated. And so the tree has a process of when it's damaged. The first thing it's going to try to do is trying to cover that wound. Just like if we get cut, our skin's trying to heal up. Then it's trying to just compartmentalize that wound to that spot. The sooner it can close up, the sooner you're not going to have insects and diseases and stuff getting in there and causing problems. So if you come out past that branch bark collar, when you cut it and it's still there, and say it'll start growing over that wound, and it looks like, they call it ram's horns. It looks like the horns of a ram as it starts to grow in and close in. Now, since the branch is kind of a separate structure than the tree trunk, it'll kind of, the sap will kind of harden off there, and it'll kind of keep insects from getting in there. But until that happens, insects can fly and land on it and start eating on it, or the insects may have some kind of a fungus or disease on it and transfer it to it. So it's a good idea if you've got several pruning jobs you got to do to disinfect your whatever cutting tool you're using between cuts or between trees, and just a bleach water solution, just spray it down. That can solve that. But yeah, so that'll slowly heal over, and as it closes in, if everything goes right, it'll close it in, and you'll never know anything different. I mean, you'll be able to probably see the spot on the trunk where it was, but hopefully there's no rot in the tree right there. If you cut inside and it can't do that ram's horn, it's going to take longer to close in, and by the time it does, you've probably got some rot going on in that tree. All right, so now we're going to talk about common problems you see with trees in urban environments. Like I mentioned, most of these, I drove around Crockett one day and took the pictures. Of course, I'd been driving around, so I kind of knew where they were, but I just drove around and took pictures. A little disclaimer, some of these are in my yard or on the edge of my yard, or a lot that wasn't mine when these trees died, but I didn't kill them. They were inherited issues from the previous owner. So, yeah, they were inherited issues that couldn't be corrected. So, I think most of the first ones are. So here's your how to kill a tree. If you really, really want to kill your tree, one thing I didn't mention during the planting, be sure to take it out of the container or unwrap the burlap from around it if it's burlap. If you know for sure it's 100% natural burlap, you can leave the burlap on there and it'll decompose fairly quickly. Lots of times those burlaps have some synthetic stuff in there, and it'll take forever. So you want to get that burlap in the container off, and so the roots can start growing. Here they put the gravel at the bottom to help it drain better. Well, you may not need it. You may not need to drain better. It may need to keep water in there for you. Don't cut you a trench too close to the roots, to the tree, because you're cutting those roots. A tree, Dr. Watson over at A&M, he does the Arboriculture 101 class, which is gets people ready to take the Certified Arborist test. He kind of describes a tree as a wine glass sitting on a dinner plate. So the trunk is the stem of the wine glass, the crown is the glass, and then the dinner plate is the roots. So everybody thinks that the roots are right there at the drip line. They most often go out further past the drip line. So if you're having to dig a trench for something, just be careful. If you can come out further than that, go ahead and do it. If you have to go in there and you're hitting roots, if you can, when you get to the bigger roots, try to dig around them, not cut through them, and you just feed your pipe up under it. I've got a video that's on YouTube. Is this one connected to the internet now?
It is, yes.
Okay, we'll try to watch that one when we get to that point. I used to have it on there, and the video that I found, the guy does a good job talking about it, but his video is just grainy. It's like it's out of focus the whole time. And I thought it was just my internet loading it slow, but no, it's his video. So all the different things, they put a guy wire in, and then they left the guy wire tied around it, and the tree's growing around it. You got your lawnmower, possibly too close, hitting the tree, spraying herbicides on stuff that might affect the tree. You got the downspout of water coming right here, spilling a lot of water in there. If it's a spot in your yard that holds water, that downspout coming out right there, that's going to saturate those roots. got all kind of different damages on the tree. You got some insect galls. Those usually aren't anything major to worry about there. I've got some pictures of that later on. You know, you can see they top the tree later on. You see how it's all the branches have branched back out right there. They got a birdhouse tied on there with wire. They got another one up here hanging on with a nail or something stuck in there. So all that stuff, you know, if you really want to kill a tree, you do some of that stuff, and it's gonna be hurting. And talk right here, coat pruning cuts with paint. Really, it's best if you don't, because the tree's got that natural defense, and its sap is going to come up there and harden off. So coating it with paint really is not doing anything to help you out. All right, here's one of the first disclaimer pictures. This is in my backyard. Technically, my property line is like right up here, but the people that lived there before just kind of cut further back, so our yard's a little bit bigger than the survey actually says. So you can obviously see a tree that's having some issues there. Can y'all, from that picture, tell what might be wrong with it? All right, let's go with this one. Yeah. So the previous landowners, they had a daughter who was, I think she might have been in high school when we bought the house from them. And so a year or two, they decided to raise goats, and they didn't have a pen or anything, so they just tied the goat to the tree. And then when they finished, they left the cable around the tree, and the tree trunk, the bark is starting to grow around there. That's included in the bark now. And eventually, what happened was that just girdled the tree. You know, it's just like strangling you. You can't breathe. You probably couldn't swallow if you tried. So that keeps the tree roots from being able to send water up the tree, and the leaves sending food and water back down. So I got there, and I was like, it was too deep in already. I was going to do more damage to the tree trying to get it out than just leaving it and hoping for the best. But of course, it died. And that's the same thing. So it's not just there; it's all the way around. All right, here's another. This one's on the edge of my yard. Technically not my property, so it's not my tree, and I didn't do it. But you can see the tree, and that was real hard to see from that picture what's causing the issue. But and that was I think it was a sassafras. But down here, that cable's loose and everything. It's not growing into the tree yet. But up here about 7 feet it was. So same goat run. So fences and trees, they don't really like each other. A lot of people like to use existing trees as their fence post. Just be aware that could happen. And that eventually that tree's probably dead now. These trees, if you just got your fence on one side of the tree, it's probably going to grow over that fence and live a long, happy life. But whenever somebody has to come cut that tree, if they don't know that barbed wire is in there, they're not going to be happy when their chain hits it. All right, back to my front yard again. Big pine tree, of course, right next to power line. But I mean, y'all can see that whole picture is everything that's wrong with that tree. It was big grapevines growing up it. I mean, those grapevines were 3-4 inch in diameter down at the base. So grapevines, they can girdle a tree just like that cable. Or most often what happens is it was growing up to the crown of the tree, and it was so much grapevine in the crown of the tree it was just shading the tree out. So that's what happened there, and I think this is the same thing. So this is the lot next to me. My parents bought the house next door to me, and this lot was in between us. And I eventually bought this lot, and I've had it mulched and cleaned up. But yeah, there were several dead trees in there when we moved in from from the grapevine that was in there. All right, this one isn't my house, but this is the home of a, all right, disclaimer, another disclaimer, I went to Mississippi State, so I can rag on the Aggies. I like Aggies as long as I keep paying my paycheck. So this is the home of a Texas A&M horticultural graduate. She's a good friend, so I can rag on her. So she called me out. She said, "Hey, mulch tree out here, it don't look good. I think it's dead. Can you help me figure out what's wrong with it?" So I went out there, and her yard looks great. And she's got this little planter bed around it. You know, she hadn't been using any chemicals around it. It wasn't, you know, she didn't change the grade a whole lot, so it wasn't a grade change in the soil there up against the trunk. The plants weren't really giving a problem to it. So we got to looking around, and you can kind of see it a little bit there. You can see a little bit better there. I think the next one shows up real good. Well, that one right there. So they put in a sprinkler system. And when they put in the sprinkler system, she was like, "Yeah, but we used one of those machines that vibrates the line down into the ground. We didn't dig a trench." Well, we're still cutting those roots. That's got to get in there somehow. So you got to get in there. You had to get that line down somewhere. When you did, even that vibrating thing, even though you couldn't see it cutting the roots, it was cutting the roots. So that's what wound up killing that. So I guess she wasn't satisfied with my answer, so she called Richard's counterpart over there at the time, and she came out and looked at it and told her the same thing. And we hadn't talked about it yet, so two of us came up with the same conclusion, so I guess she believed us after that. But she had also mentioned that, you know, in front of her house, they had, I think already like 3 nice big post oaks that they had cut down, because they just built the house a few years earlier. So that construction disturbance among those post oak trees right in front of her house wound up stressing them out, and they died. So, and that's one of the things we're going to get to, talking about construction with your trees.
Do arborists take down trees?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So arborists, they'll come in and you know they'll help you try to figure out what's going on with your tree and help with the health of it and save your tree. They'll come in and prune your tree if you just need it pruned, or they'll take it down. You go on that ISA website, and it has a spot on there, search for a certified arborist. The problem is the closest one from here is going to be over in College Station, or down in Huntsville, or all the way up to Dallas. Now you have tree removal companies around here that will come in and remove trees. They're not certified arborists, and they can prune trees and do a good job pruning trees. They're just not a certified arborist. So it kind of depends on, and they may not be able to help you diagnose the problem, the issue with your tree. But you know, if you're just needing some pruning done, you know the tree's looking good, other than you just need some branches taken out, you know they can probably help you prune. Now if you got somebody who hasn't got a lot of experience doing that, they'll do what they call lines tailing, where they prune everything else itself, or the leaves and everything right at the end of the limbs, so it looks like a tuft of a line still out there. Well, that's catching a lot of wind in there, and that's going to cause some extra stress and movement on the branch. Or they may just top your tree. They'll cut everything off back to a stub like that, and you don't. And I think I got some pictures of stuff like that in here. So this is behind the sheriff's office there in Crockett, as they were doing the construction, building the new sheriff's office. So you can see right here, it looks like they dug a trench out. When they planted these shrubs, they got some little pop-up sprinklers right there, or just water faucets sticking up. So they dug a trench to put in a water line. That tree It's not a huge tree. I think that tree may have survived that. Now you got this big tree there. Luckily they came in kind of radially, so they probably didn't cut too many roots going into that tree. But it's possible, you know, they came in pretty close to it. And that's a big tree, so if you cut too many of the roots on that tree, he's going to have issues. All right, here's that video that I've talked about. So one way to, if you have a really nice tree, high value tree in your yard, and you've got to run a new water line or a gas line or something through your yard, and it's got to go, you know, close to that tree. One way to keep from having to dig a trench and cutting roots is to use this air spade.
AirSpade is the premier air-powered soil excavation tool used worldwide by tree service companies and landscapers to maintain tree health. Manufactured by Guard Air Corporation, a leading U.S. manufacturer of industrial pneumatic tools, AirSpade was originally developed in the 1980s. Today, thousands of AirSpades are in use worldwide by arborists and tree care professionals. Soil is a mixture of solid particles with voids occupied by air and/or water. When compressed air is directed into soil at close range, air enters the voids, expands, and fractures the soil. Stronger, non-porous materials such as metal or plastic pipes, cables, or even tree roots are unaffected. AirSpade's patented supersonic nozzle turns compressed air into a high-speed, laser-like jet, moving at twice the speed of sound. All of the energy and momentum of air moving at 1,200 miles per hour is focused onto the soil, dislodging it in a fraction of a second. Improperly designed nozzles or homemade open pipes do a substandard job of soil excavation, as the air exiting these devices dissipates in an unfocused, ineffective manner. Incorporating state-of-the-art safety and design features, AirSpade is easy and comfortable to use. Beside the supersonic nozzle, these include a non-conductive fiberglass barrel, adjustable dirt shield, ergonomic handle, and deadman trigger with steel trigger guard. In competitive tests, AirSpade outperforms other air excavation tools. Faster digging with AirSpade means less worker fatigue, faster completion of projects, and lower energy costs. AirSpade is used in a number of tree care applications, including root collar excavation, vertical mulching, radial trenching, soil aeration, root pruning, bare rooting and transplanting. Root collar excavation. Many trees are planted too deep or are partially buried due to multiple layers of mulch. When the root collar or root flare is not visible, chronic problems can occur. Problems include girdling roots, pest infestation, or poor growth, all of which can cause decline and eventually death of a tree. Root collar excavation or root flare excavation is the process of safely removing soil and/or mulch around the trunk of a tree with the AirSpade. Girdling roots can then be identified and removed. Vertical mulching. Urban and suburban trees exist in an unnatural environment in which mulch or open soil is often restricted to a narrow diameter around the trunk. This is in contrast to the natural environment of a forest where leaves fall and decompose into rich topsoil underneath the entire canopy. Instead, thick grass under the canopy competes with the tree for moisture and nutrients, causing decline. Vertical mulching is the process of using the AirSpade to poke holes in the soil within the root zone, generally out to the canopy drip line. The AirSpade is simply pushed into the ground to a depth of approximately 18 inches, creating a 3 to 4 inch diameter hole. These vertical columns allow for air, moisture, and nutrients to reach the tree roots. Columns can then be filled with nutrients or fertilizer, thus encouraging the generation of feeder roots in this enhanced soil. Radial trenching. Radial trenching is used to both aerate the soil and provide a means to add nutrients. Air spade is used to excavate spokes, or radii, out from the base of a tree. This process leaves most of the soil unaffected while allowing for additional soil amendments. Radial trenching is commonly used to protect existing, highly valued trees in proximity to building construction, utility installation, or sidewalk or driveway construction. Soil aeration. Soil surrounding a tree can become compacted over time due to foot traffic, construction projects, or general settling. Compacted soil can starve a tree due to inadequate air and/or water required for respiration. Soil aeration creates voids, which fill with air and water, thus nourishing the tree. This process also creates drain passages for excess runoff, thereby minimizing saturation and root decay. Air spade quickly and safely aerates compacted soil from around the base of a tree without damaging the existing root structure. Root pruning. Installation of a sidewalk, driveway, or patio often involves excavation near tree roots. Air spade is used to first uncover roots so that an arborist can determine which ones can be safely removed while protecting the health and stability of the tree. Bare rooting and transplanting. Trees may need to be transplanted due to building or road construction or for aesthetic reasons. Air spade is used to remove soil and rocks from the roots or root ball to reduce tree weight. Cranes and forklifts are often used to move larger trees.
So if you notice that last, when they were transplanting that tree, you know, they had a bobcat skid steer out there, but I don't know if y'all noticed the plywood they had laid across the ground. So that's one way to help distribute the weight of machinery if you're having to do some work around a tree and keep it from compacting the soil. But yeah, basically this is basically just a 9-minute commercial for air spade, but it's the best one I could find that kind of demonstrated what all it does. So the air spade can help, you know, if you're needing to put in some kind of a trench water line or something next to a tree, they can blow out that trench, and then you can feed the whatever line you need through the roots. And they mentioned vertical mulching. You can do that without an air spade. If you have like a paint stir or something with little screw tips on your drill bit, you can go in and, as long as your ground's not too hard, you can drill you a hole in the ground, several holes, you know, underneath the drip line of the tree, and then just come back with a mix of, you know, some compost or mulch or whatever, kind of filled in there, and that kind of gives it a little boost of nutrients right there next to the roots. Same thing with that radial trenching. You start from the trunk and go out like spokes on a wheel. A little bit more, because it gets a little bit more surface area than just doing that vertical mulching. Also, the aerating they talked about. If your soil underneath your trees become compacted for whatever issue it may be, it'll loosen that soil up, kind of fluff it back up. Because when you compact that soil, you know, it's harder for the trees to grow in there. It's harder for them to get water through that soil into the roots. So fluffing that back up, that soil will hold water better. And roots need to breathe too. You know, they take in air as well. So if it's either saturated from too much water, there's actually no air in there, or if it's compacted, you know, it's fewer pore space there for air to be next to the roots. All right, so continuing my trip around Crockett. This is by one of the banks there right off downtown. You know, these are live oak trees, but they're planted in these containers. So eventually, you know, like I said, a normal tree, its roots are going way on out. If they were to bust one of these off and cut down in there, you probably get roots just circling and circling and circling. I don't remember seeing any of these trees that have died since I've been in Crockett, since 2008. But, you know, if they're doing fine, you know, they put it there, they knew it's going to do that, but, you know, that could be an issue. And of course, they've heavily pruned and shaped the crowns. You know, that's fine. If you're wanting that, that's fine. But you know, if you have something larger than that, with really large limbs, that can just continually produce weak spots on the tree. All right, planting trees underneath power lines. Seems like at least people in Crockett love to do this. So I don't know if people planted them there, or if they were already there and they ran the power lines and they just didn't cut the tree down when they did it. But you know, there's one. That's by City Hall and the police department. Now I know those were planted after the power line because at City Hall and everything, it's not that old of a building, so I know those were planted right up underneath it. Now here's another. These are the same trees, kind of on that same street. So pecan trees, right? I mean, you couldn't take a plumb bob and hang it off that power line and have it any more center much under. It's in the city park. There's a pine tree underneath there, and it's come through and they've topped it once. But that pine tree, you know, threw itself back. All right, this one, you might not think there's anything wrong with this, and that tree's fine right now. But I used to be at the office down in Koontz, and we had a lady call. Said she had this problem, like her bark was trying to peel off her tree. So we went over and she had a bunch of canna lilies like this planted at the base of a live oak, and it was probably about the size of that tree. It was a pretty good sized trunk on it. And yeah, so the plants all around the trunk was holding in a lot of moisture, which was causing a little fungus to start growing on the trunk, and it was causing some of the trunk to peel away, bark to peel away from the trunk. So you just have to be careful and not let it get too moist in there and start causing. And I mean, it's the same way as having mulch right up against the trunk of the tree.
But that was so pretty.
Yeah, that's pretty.
That's beautiful.
I love it.
It looks good, and there's nothing wrong with doing it. Just be aware.
But
Be
the
careful.
canna lilies need lots of water, but the tree doesn't need that much water.
Yeah.
So should we plant something else instead of those?
It wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, that's really pretty.
I said it's beautiful. Just
Yeah.
Is that your house?
No.
Okay, well.
You're over here.
Just asking.
No, I think we're done with the ones at my house. So this is in the city park over there. This tree, you know, you can see it's got some rot here already, which is real common with willow oaks and water oaks. And a storm came through and it had big branch there, and it broke the branch off. When it broke off, you know, all that bark came off with it. So that's just kind of an example of, you know, if you have something that you need to prune off, do that 3-cut method to help keep that from happening.
Now, if that happens to a tree, can you save the tree?
I think that tree is still there and growing. You know, it's doing its best to heal up. And that rot's going to stay there, and it's just going to eventually get worse and worse. But you know, the playground's right over here, so they probably want to take that tree out before it falls on somebody.
Now, if I had some problem in my yard with some trees, because we've been there 10 years, and I didn't realize a lot of things you said this morning I should have done. Now, if I have some problem, can someone come and look at the apartment to make sure? Yeah.
As long as, like, you know, if you like got something wrapped around it, if you can cut that off and it's not already embedded too deep into that bark, it'll be fine because you got your bark. You know, it's the thin layer, it's the outside stuff, and then right up under that layer you have the I think it's the phloem. So the phloem are the vessels of the tree that after the leaves make food, sends all that back down to the rest of the tree. And then you have the cambium sandwiched in between the phloem and the xylem. And the xylem is what's taking up the water to the tree. And then once you get inside the xylem, all that wood is dead wood. It's just there for structural support now. And as long as air is not getting into it, it's not rotting. It'll stay there and be strong. So as long as whatever's wrapped around there is not eating and getting into that xylem, getting into that phloem and that cambium, you can pull it off and the tree should be okay.
what I'm saying is that if I have a problem in my yard with the trees, who can I call to come out and look at what the problem is?
Well, we can come out and kind of give you an idea if we can figure out what's going on, or if there's a problem. If you need anything more than that, and you need like a certified arborist, go to that ISA website, the International Society of Arboriculture, and I don't know if I have that one on the list or not.
Come out from Bryan. You were saying they were in Bryan. Are they going to come out this far?
Some of them will. Yeah, it just depends. Like I said, I think there's probably some on the list from Huntsville.
Okay.
I don't know how far down from Dallas the closest one is.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody in Corsicana. I don't know. Now, we have certified arborists with the Forest Service that are on the list. Now, just be aware, we won't do any work that needs to be done, any of the pruning or anything like that, or if you need anything cabled or anything like that. The other guys that are the private arborists, they'll come out and do any work like that. Now, we can come out and say, yeah, this is the problem with the tree. And it may be something that you can correct yourself and not have to have an arborist do it for you.
So y'all basically do like the diagnostic part of it.
I want some diagnostic.
All right, y'all might be able to see that one real easy. What's wrong with that one? Can you see this tree every day?
It's got a vine going up it, doesn't it? Looks like it.
No,
Is that a vine or is
no, it's a lightning strike.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So that's just a few days after it got hit. It's on the way home to my house. So I saw it after it got hit, and I'm like, I'm gonna stop, get some good pictures of that.
We actually have a tree in our front yard that got struck by lightning a few years back.
Yeah, I probably heard it. We're next door neighbors, so
Oh.
so yeah, that's probably one that almost made me jump out of my skin. Yeah, we're on top of a hill, and so we get, when a good lightning storm comes through, we get a lot of pops around there, and some of them get pretty close. But yeah, so I mean, you can see it blew the bark off there, and so that one's really easy to tell what was wrong with that tree. All right, here comes the Crepe Myrtle soapbox. So Crepe Myrtles, they are classified as a tree, and normally like a single trunk tree, but they will grow like a shrub if you continually prune them or hack them or whatever. You know, the Crepe Myrtle. So you know, usually you'll see, like I mentioned before, with the volcano, the mulch volcanoes, you'll be going through a city, and they'll have the mulch volcanoes at the base of Crepe Myrtles that they have come through and, you know, hacked off everything, you know, eye level, and they're just all growing back out. If that's what you want with your Crepe Myrtle, fine. You know, if you want it to grow like that. But a Crepe Myrtle grown as a single stem tree can be a very, very pretty tree. This one right here, you can see the crown of this Crepe Myrtle is right there. And it's a single trunk tree, and each year when it blooms out, it's beautiful.
You really don't need to cut them back.
No. Now, pruning the tips of the branches at the right time of the year, and I don't know if it's fall or spring, will help them bloom a little bit better. But cutting them all the way back, like cutting them right there, that's to me makes it ugly. But nobody's living in this house anymore, so the yard's not being maintained. So a lot of suckers have started popping up. So it's gonna be soon not as pretty once those suckers get big enough to where it's.
Go through with the scissors or pruners and just cut all the suckers off, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I need to do.
Yeah. So even, you know, if you're keeping it like that, that Crepe Myrtle's gonna keep sending those suckers up. When they're young, they're soft and tender, and you can get them with a lawnmower or a hoe or snips or whatever. All right, so for the common construction problems, so if construction is going on and the crew, they're not worried about your tree or whatever trees are around there. You can have trunk injury, crown injury. They can cut the roots and damage the roots. They can compact the soil. They can change the grade of the soil. They can smother the roots. They can have spills around it, whether it's cleaners, diesel, gasoline, paint, whatever. Herbicides, that they may be having to spray herbicides to knock back some stuff that they're trying to do some work with, and they spill the herbicide right there. And then exposure to the elements with sunlight and wind. I don't know if I have a slide for that particular thing, so I'll mention that now. If you've got, like, if you go out and buy a spot to build a house, and it's pretty wooded, if you thin out, if you cut out the area where you're going to build your house, and then you go out like the next acre or two around there and thin out the trees to kind of open it up a little bit, those trees are growing right there, and they've got all the crowns that are there now are shading the trunks of itself and everything else. And it's also, all those trees are providing a little bit of a wind break. So as the wind comes through, it kind of slows down, gives them a little wind resistance there. If you go in and you thin out pretty heavy, it's going to open up a lot more of that sunlight. It's going to be hitting the trunks. And trunks can get sunburned just like we can. It can damage the bark of trees. If they're not used to it, and then all of a sudden, boom, you got tons of sunlight hitting your tree, it can damage your bark. And then there's less wind resistance there, so more wind coming through there could cause those trees to sway back and forth a whole lot more, and can cause some stress on the wood fibers in there, and could weaken your trees a little bit. So just be right. It's fine to take some trees out, open everything up. And, I mean, part of forest management is coming in and doing thinnings occasionally to remove trees to reduce that resource competition. But if you remove too much, it can affect the trees that you leave. All right, so your trunk damage, machinery can hit it. Crown injury, if you've got like a track hoe or something in there, they can hit limbs and break limbs off. And that break, if it gets broken, then it needs to be pruned off properly. But where that break is, you're going to have some issues there. Cutting of roots, all kinds of stuff's going on from getting that pad ready, which anything close to that pad is probably going to suffer from soil compaction down the road. And that's where you're building your house, but it's going to be your foundation. So the root thing is kind of it's expected there. But cutting roots as you're coming in, putting in water lines, or you're burying your electricity, or putting in a gas line, sewer line, or whatever. If there's a spot where you can come in and come around, and you got this tree that you're wanting to save, bypass those roots if possible. All this heavy equipment coming in, it's definitely going to compact the soil. If you're doing something and not doing a whole lot of machinery work, but you have like a bobcat or something like that coming in, if they can put some kind of mats down or just some plywood pieces down to drive over that, it'll help distribute that weight and not compact the soil so much. Changing the grade, lots of times you have to come in and you got to get it level. Well, if they bring in a whole bunch of dirt and some of that dirt winds up being piled up close to that tree, well, your roots were that far below the soil surface. Now they're that far below the soil surface, they're not getting the drainage, and they're not getting the air oxygen that they need as they were before. Smothering the roots, same thing. Of course, changing the grade, another thing that goes along with that is if that soil gets piled up around the trunk, the root collar was here. Well, the root collar is still there. The ground level, soil level was there. Well, now that they've raised the soil level up here, well, that's going to start causing probably some fungus issues and other issues on the part that's buried. Then your spills. one thing you can do is when you do the contract for the construction site, is put in there that, hey, we've got this nice big tree. I don't want anything to happen to this tree. We're going to put a barrier up there. Put a fence up there where they can't even get up under that tree to eat lunch under that tree. Because if they can get in there to eat lunch, they're going to get in there and, you know, store their gas and their chemicals and their paint and everything under that tree. Or they're going to wind up parking the machinery in that tree. So don't just put a little, you know, little orange construction barrier around it. Put a fence around it and tell them, say, hey, if y'all are in here, if I see y'all storing stuff under here, you know, this is a whatever amount fine on top of your construction job, which they're going to make up on the end of it anyway. But you know, if they can get in there, they're going to store stuff in there.
I have a question. I probably should have asked it at another chapter here. Does it hurt a tree if you like staple Christmas lights? I mean, you're only going like a little bit in the bark and you take the staples out.
No, most likely that staple's not getting through the bark. And that's what the bark's there for, is to protect the tree. It's like your skin. It's protecting you from, you know, whatever viruses or anything is out there. And, you know, whatever dirt gets all over you, you just clean it off. So as long as, like when you start nailing something into a tree, like hang a birdhouse, once that nail breaks into that wood, breaks that wall, that's when the tree starts doing its defense mechanism, trying to heal itself. All right, so this is again behind the new sheriff's office over there. Well, I keep saying new sheriff. It's been there for what, 5 to 8 years now. So you can see machinery. They hit this tree and peeled off a lot of bark on it. This one, I think what happened was maybe there was a big vine that was the bark was starting to grow around already, and as they were cleaning, they hooked that vine and pulled that vine off. So now it's a little bit of crease there. I don't know if that tree has. I don't know if it's still there. If it is, if it had any problems from that or not, it may have healed up just fine. But just, you know, something that, you know, probably don't want to do if you don't have to. Same place, you know, the machinery hit the trunk right there and peeled off bark again. All right, and then you start seeing, you can see back here, you know, they brought in all this dirt, well, to get everything level. Well, it's sitting there, and, you know, who knows, it might sit there for, you know, a couple of days, might sit there for a few months. And the whole time it's doing it, it's compacting that soil, it's reducing the amount of oxygen the roots are getting. And then they got to come in and you know, eventually they're either using that or taking that away. Well, then they got machinery coming in and compacting the soil further, or even, you know, possibly digging into the ground and getting some of the roots. So then it's just more of those spots. Got their, you know, pickups parking underneath trees usually isn't a big problem. When you have heavier stuff like bulldozers and dump trucks and like that parking under there, then you can start seeing compaction. You know, just about everybody's driveway goes right underneath the tree, so they can usually handle, you know, pickups and cars and stuff driving through. But there you go, some more you can see it, you know, parked underneath. But like I said, that's probably not giving them any issues, you know, not as much as that big pile of dirt right up there. Yeah, that big pile of dirt. And you see they went through and they flagged, put ribbon around all these trees. So we're going to keep these trees. They're like, yeah, you can try to keep them, but, you know, they may not want to hang around when y'all get done. All right, this is the city park over there. They came in and put in this this walking path. So just a little bit of work they did around there. You know, they could have disturbed the roots or compacted the soil a little bit right there. Of course, definitely you're not. You got a spot right here where you're not getting any more water into the roots right there. But I think those are okay. Now there's some more trees, and maybe the next few slides that are in this park that they didn't fare so well. Yes, that's the same walking path. I think those trees are still there and doing okay. So I mentioned Dr. Watson earlier, and I think I don't know if he's the one that first mentioned or not, but he describes trees growing in an urban environment being like trees trying to grow on concrete. So that's my little picture to go along with his little saying there. And then, of course, that's out in the hill country. They built a Hobby Lobby. The soil, and who knows if they reduced that whole area down that far, or if that was kind of a mound there to begin with, and they just decided, hey, we're going to leave that little tree there on that mound. Well, I mean, that's all the soil they have out there because everything is rock, and that's its roots. So they took out all the roots of that tree. They left an area probably like this around that tree. And I wouldn't be parking right there because if a good strong wind came through, I mean, it could blow that tree over. I mean, it'd be a little bit harder to blow it over because there's no leaves up there for sails to catch wind now, but I wouldn't park right beside that one. All right. So several years ago, they built this pond in the city park. I went on vacation, came back, went to our NRCS office, and they said, hey, did you see the city's new pond? I was like, no, where? They said, in the park. I said, no. I said, y'all help them with that? Because the NRCS, they'll help plan out ponds and everything for you. He said, nope, they never called us. So they don't even know where the spillway, how high the spillway is supposed to be in the pond. So I went over and looked at it, and it's a horseshoe-shaped pond. And they left this peninsula going out there with all that row of nice big post oaks. And I'm like, I know it's going to happen here. So I started taking pictures. So I started taking pictures of that tree out on the very tip. I came back every week and took a picture in the same spot. But you can see they came in and they cut this tree. I mean, they cut roots, took roots out from all these trees. But that one, I mean, they probably took 95% of the roots off of that tree. And I think, so started going. And you can see already, I mean, that tree's not looking that great. I mean, the trees around it, this one over here, that tree's nice and green, looking good for now. But that one is already starting to see brown up there. The next week, it's even more. Next week, it's already starting to lose leaves. The light wasn't as good that day. It was a little bit cloudy, so it wasn't as good a picture. But you can tell that it's dropping leaves already. Even more. Oh, we got a good rain and a good bit of drainage comes right through where they built that pond. So it filled that pond up that week. So now they had water in the pond. That tree couldn't get it though, so it had more roots to suck it up. So you can see the progression. And then, there it was a few weeks later. So then they also had one. So you can see this one's starting to.
Yeah.
I think this tree is gone now too. I think this big tree, I think it's still there, but I think both of these trees are gone. There's also a tree over here where they built the levee. That's it right there. Where they should have just cut the tree down because it's they built the levee around it. Well, it's gone too. So they not only cut the roots on it, but they changed the grade and piled dirt up around it.
I bet they're sorry they didn't ask for help now.
Yeah, they didn't ask us about trees, and they didn't ask the NRCS about the pond construction on it. But those are those two trees right there, the one on the peninsula and the one over on the levee. And that's them now. They're gone. Not any stumps anymore. All right, so some solutions. Plan your construction in respect to your trees. Whether it's if you just need to take some of the trees out because you have too many trees on the lot. Just be aware of that sunlight and the extra wind hitting the trunks. If it's a nice big tree you're wanting to keep, and wanting to put your Adirondack chairs under it when your house is built and everything's going, tell the construction crew. If anything happens to this tree, it's a certain amount of fine to it. Do everything you can, but put that barrier around it so they can't get in there and eat around it. Like I said, don't allow anything inside that barrier. If anything gets in that barrier, if they can walk in there, sit down, take a break, eat their lunch, they're probably taking their gas jug and they're willing to. Use tunneling or air spade whenever possible. And that's the thing, you just have to find an arborist that would have that piece of machinery. Because I think just that wand is like $1,000, $2,000 just for the wand. Wow. Then it's got to be run off a compressor, a pretty good sized compressor. So it's not something you're going to do yourself. I mean, I wouldn't recommend anybody go out and just buy an air spade just to use around their home unless you have something unless you're going to be using a lot. But those guys, they charge to come out and do that, so they can afford to have that type of machine. That's part of their job. And then once again, you use some kind of mats or plywood to put down on some of that machinery if possible to help distribute some of that weight. All right, so now we're into common insects and diseases that we see around here. I'm not nowhere near getting all of them, but usually when someone calls us and say, hey, I think something's wrong with my tree, this is normally what's going to be the problem. All right, so this is called bark lice. It's also called tree cattle. And what it is the insects get on the tree and they pretty much just spin a web, kind of like a spider's web, all up over the tree. And really, this looks bad. If it happened, if you saw it on your trees, you'd start freaking out. But this isn't harming the tree. Actually, it's doing good because the insects that are up under it are feeding on other little bugs and lichens and stuff that's on the bark. So they're kind of cleaning the bark off. I think I took these pictures when I was in the Kuntz office. We were down in Beaumont and on this one. And so if you see this, it's fine. Just let it run its course. You take your water hose and spray it off. They're going to build the web right back, and they're going to keep doing that until they're done. But that's not an issue. It's actually a good thing for the tree. There's just more of it, so it's kind of easy to see when you see that web all over the tree. Now you got that that's doing the web on the trunk and the bark, but then you got this other web, so the fall webworms. You'll see them usually lots of time, most common probably on pecan trees. And they'll be kind of out on the end of the branch, and they'll form their web and lay their eggs and everything, and the caterpillars in there will eat the leaves that defoliate the branches and everything. Yeah. It's more of an eyesore than anything harming the tree, unless it's just a real heavy infestation and they're all over the tree and completely defoliate the tree. You probably have to do it 2 or 3 times during the growing season. The tree's just going to sprout more leaves out and be okay. Because they're not actually getting in and really doing anything underneath the bark to harm the tree. Insect gall, so this wasp comes in and lays its eggs underneath the bark of the branch. and the kind of defense mechanism of the tree is to grow this gall, and then that's where the bug lives and everything. It's not really, once again, not doing a whole lot of harm to the tree. It just looks kind of bad. So I wouldn't try to, if there's a whole bunch of them, I wouldn't have to worry about trying to get those off of there or anything. You'd probably do more damage getting them off than just leaving them alone. All right, so with pine trees, kind of the most common problem we see with pine trees are these pine engraver beetles. We call them Hips beetles. They are a pine bark beetle, but they're not the southern pine bark beetle. The southern pine bark beetle, they will, and these are horrible pictures, but they will start, if you got a 1,000-acre pine plantation, and they get started in one corner of it, they'll continue to spread either until they run out of pine trees or until you get out in front of them and stop them. And the way you stop southern pine bark beetles is you have to get out in front of them and cut a buffer and leave those trees laying there. They can't fly over that buffer. They don't like those trees laying on the ground. So that stops the spread of them. Fortunately, in Texas, we haven't had southern pine bark beetle infestations in over 20-something years. I don't know why they haven't been in Texas, but they kind of worked their way around the south, across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, up the East Coast to and it made it all the way up like New Jersey and kind of worked their way back. I think the closest that they've been maybe back in Louisiana, but I know a couple years ago they were on I think the Homestead National Forest outside of Pittsburgh, Mississippi. So I credit it to our old one of our retired foresters, Joe Pace, who has worked in our forest health and pest department. I say he scared them out, and he's still alive, so they're scared to come back.
So the engraver beetles.
And Joe probably took these pictures though.
The engraver beetles, can you do anything about them? Do they spread it out of the trees? Tell me about them.
Okay, so the engraver beetles, the Ips beetles, there's several different kinds. There's the 4, 5, 6 spine engraver beetles, and so here's the southern pine bark beetle. So you can see, the 4 spine is about the same size as the southern pine beetle, and then they get bigger. And then there's the black turpentine. So the black turpentine beetle, it normally only attacks the lower 10 feet of the trunk, and unless it's a real heavy infestation, the tree's probably going to be okay. So those aren't really anything to worry about. And those are really the only ones that you could treat because you can reach that. The rest of them are attacking the entire tree all the way to the top.
That's what killed us too.
So there's nothing, I mean, if you sprayed them, you'd have to spray the whole thing, but by the time you realize they're in there, they've probably already done their damage and the tree's going to die. So why are they called the 4, 5, and 6 spine? Well, this is the southern pine bark beetle. Their back end is rounded. The Ips beetles, their back end is concave, and how many spines are on it? They didn't put a whole lot of thought into naming them. They made it easy. All right, so when they attack the tree and the tree's dead and that bark starts loosening up, you can pull that bark back, and you can see their galleries where their eggs are in there eating around. The Ips beetles look kind of like an H or an I. The southern pine bark beetle. Southern pine beetle is usually kind of it's S-shaped. It's just kind of wandering S looking. So if you see wandering S, don't call me because I don't want to know about them. Because I don't want to have to deal with them. So what they do is they fly. They land on the tree. They bore into the bark right there. Those little pinholes. They lay their eggs. Their eggs hatch. They feed up under the bark, making those galleries. And as they're doing that, they're basically girdling the tree. So they're preventing the tree from being able to send that water up. And then once they develop into adults, they emerge and fly out to another tree, start it all over again. Now the southern pine beetle, they would fly from this tree to that tree to the next tree, next tree. Ips beetles, they'll emerge and they'll fly out. I mean, that might be your neighbor's property over before they hit the next tree. There's no way of knowing which tree they're going to hit next. In normal weather conditions, normal rainfall conditions, you'll see groups of maybe one tree to groups of 3, 4 trees getting hit at a time. During 2011, we were seeing groups of 20 or more trees being attacked at a time. So what you'll see, you'll notice the top of the tree starting to turn red from the top down.
That's them.
And then you'll also, if there's enough moisture in the tree, their defense is to do these pitch tubes, send their sap, try to fill in those holes and force those bugs out. So you may see that. You may see a little bit of sawdust on the ground or in the bark, but normally what you're seeing when you just start seeing a lot of sawdust are Ambrosia beetles that are coming in. And that's what's feeding under there. The Ambrosia, they're feeding on the dead wood. The tree's already dead when they come in. They start in and you see these little dimpled spots on the bark. And then, I don't know, I can't remember what the actual beetle looks like, but this is their larva. It's like a little alien, nasty looking dude, big old mandibles on the front. And if you've ever heard anybody talk about it, you can hear them chewing on the wood. You can stand down the tree and you can hear them. That's what's doing it. But they're like termites. They're feeding on the dead wood. So they didn't kill the tree. They're just taking advantage of the tree that's there that's dead. All right, then we have the emerald ash borer. We've got 2 different information sheets over there. So this came from China. Like most of the stuff that's bad for us comes from China. Like something else we're dealing with right now. But obviously we can't say it's China's fault because that's... but what they think happened is it came in with some cargo or some woods on some pallets or something in like Western Canada, in the ports over there, and kind of worked its way around and made it to, came in through like Michigan and Wisconsin, down through Illinois and Indiana and Kentucky and everything, and it's just kind of working its way down. And it's now in Texas. They have, for the past several years, found this bug up in the Dallas area. Well, the first ones they found, and we put out traps all over East Texas. The Forest Service puts out some traps. I think in Leon County, I don't know who puts them out.
But they've been out.
Yeah, but somebody's putting them out over here. We've got some partners putting on. Maybe it's somebody with Sound Houston that comes up and does it, I don't know. But if you've seen these like cardboard triangle things that are about that long and purple hanging in a tree, that's what that is. It's a emerald ash borer trap. So they'll
somewhere.
Yeah, so they'll hang a bait attractant in there, a pheromone that they like, and then the trap, don't touch it because it's just covered in sticky. So they'll fly and land on that and get stuck, and we'll check it, we'll put it out, and then in 2 months we'll rebait it, check it, see if there's any bugs on there, and then 2 months later than that we'll remove them and look to see if there's any of these bugs on there. Well, the first ones were up around, I think up around Karnak, up around that the lake area around there. But they just found like 1 or 2 and then never found any more than that. Well, then the next year they found and have continually caught bugs up around the Dallas area, Tarrant County and everything. So, I mean, you see how small the bug is? Emerald ash borer, it doesn't, like I said, they don't put a lot of effort into naming them. It's emerald colored, and it's very shimmery. It's a shimmery looking bug, and it attacks ash trees. So it's emerald is ash, and all species of ash. Mainly what we have in Texas is green ash. I think there's a Texas ash, some white ash in a few spots, maybe some pumpkin ash, but they act pretty much the same way as the Ips beetles do. Land on the tree, they bore into it. The only difference is when they bore into it, they leave this D-shaped hole that's laying on the back of the D. So if you have an ash tree and it starts looking bad, if you can see those holes, you know, then there you go. That's what it is. They haven't found any kind of defense to stop them. Luckily in Texas, ash trees are mainly, you know, an urban tree. I mean, we've got them in the forest, but they're not a major forest product tree. They're a small percentage of the forest. Usually, you know, they're a good shade tree, so there's a lot of them around homes and in the cities. So that could be an issue. Now in Kentucky, what are baseball bats made out of? Ash. You know, ash is a big thing in Kentucky because that's you know Louisville sluggers and everything else is made up there. So they're having to look at some other things. I think they're using maple and some other stuff to make bats now to help offset losing so many ash trees from this bug. And that's just another one. I think this one talks about the ones that have been found up around Tarrant County and everything. So
Well, there isn't any other pest that can kill them.
not here. I mean, probably in China it is.
Yeah.
But then you run the risk of if you bring that and release it, and try to what is it going to do?
Right.
Like the plants.
They were working on some stuff, trying some stuff out. But I mean, it kind of did something, but not on the scale that we needed to. Main thing is trying to transport your firewood, especially if it's ash, because that's how it gets moved around. Somebody northeast Texas throws a chunk of wood in there. It's got the borer in it. They drive down here to Fort Boggy State Park, hop out, you know, bug comes out, finds a nice tree down there, then boom, we have it in Leon County. So buy local, get your firewood local if you're going off camping somewhere or anything like that. Smooth patch. This is it's a fungus that kind of eats the outer part of the bark. And usually it's not going to harm the tree. It just kind of slowly eats away the outside of the bark. Doesn't go into the interior portion of the tree. More or less makes it look bad. You know, I'll get a call like, "Oh, my tree looks horrible. Something's wrong with the bark. It's growing all over the bark." You go over there, and it's a smooth patch. And most of the time, it'll be just a little portion of the trunk. Now, this tree, I did see this, and it was almost the whole thing. Now, since it's attacking the bark, and the bark is the outer defense for the tree, it may allow other things to be able to come in and attack it a little bit easier. But normally, the smooth patch is not killing the tree. And that's just another. See, normally it's just a little small patch like that. Of course, it can continue to spread, but not killing the tree. All right. Talked about yips with pines. So our most common issue we have with hardwood trees in our area is Hypoxian cancer. Now, Hypoxian cancer on its own is not going to bother a healthy tree. It's a fungus, and the spore for that fungus, it's on every tree out there right now. As long as the tree is healthy and growing fine, it's fighting it off. Now, when the tree gets stressed out from drought, other insects or diseases, construction damage or anything like that, then Hypoxian, its fruiting bodies are able to start growing, gets up underneath the bark, and just clogs up those vessels that move water up and down the tree, just pretty much chokes the tree out. So you'll notice leaves start turning brown, leaves start falling off, fine branches start falling off, then bigger branches start falling off, and you'll notice the bark start just popping off in chunks. And where that piece of bark pops off, up underneath it'll be either a reddish brown or this silvery colored patch of mold that will eventually turn, you know, tarry black like that once it gets older. And that's if you see that, for sure it's Hypoxian. And normally the tree goes pretty quickly. I have seen a few cases where it starts on one branch way out here, and you know, tree does seems like it's doing fine for several years before it's finally dead. But eventually, the tree is probably going to die. If you have something like that where you can tell it's just maybe one branch affected, you might be able to prune that branch off and prevent it from going into the rest of it. But you know, it's not a guarantee. And then any other pruning cuts you do on that tree, you know, disinfect your blade before you do another one, because if you cut here and you get the fungus on it, and you prune over here and the fungus isn't up there yet, then you know, you could transfer it up there. Like I said, it usually goes pretty quick. If you want to wait and see if it's going to make it and be okay, that's fine. But you know, once it's dead, go ahead and cut it down. Especially if it's going to be a hazard tree, you know, close to your house, close to where you park your car. It's going to fall on your fence, or it's, you know, got a lot of foot traffic under there where it could fall and hit somebody. Go ahead and cut it down. If it's out in the middle of the woods, just leave it. Getting rid of the wood, burning the wood, anything like that is not going to prevent it from attacking another tree, because like I said, the spore's out there on every tree already anyway. There's another one that we've seen here in Leon and Madison County here this summer. Richard called me, and our forest health guy, we went and looked at it, and it was verticillium, I think is what it's called. It's another fungus, kind of does the same way as Hypoxian. It clogs up those vessels, but what it was doing is it wasn't causing the bark to pop off like that. But it was, and it usually starts with like having a bunch of stuff piled up around the base of the tree, and it was clogging up the pores and not allowing the water to get up there, enough water for the tree to be able to leaf out during the spring. It would try. The one lady over here in Oakwood, it tried to leaf out a couple of times and then just didn't. And then I think the lady we went to over in North Zulch, like half of her tree leafed out, and the other half didn't. So, I mean, you can try to remove all that stuff from the base of the tree and see if it will recover and maybe the next spring come out. But usually once it's got that fungus in there, it's probably not going to do good. There's a fungicide that you can inject into the tree. But our forest health coordinator, he's like, the literature he's seen on it is the effective rate on that is so low, and the chemical and the injection process is so expensive. It's just not worth it. Just go ahead and like I said, you can wait and see if it recovers after you kind of clean up the stuff around it that's causing the issue. But if not, just go ahead and cut the tree down. This is a new one that's kind of been hitting some areas around too. This is over in Houston County, just north of the lake, and this Laurel Wilt hits red bay trees and sassafras trees. So these are sassafras trees, and it's it's kind of the same thing as a fungus gets in there, and if you have a sassafras tree that's not looking good or dying, you can take your knife or an axe or something to kind of scrape that bark off. And when you see this black stain in there, that's a pretty good indication that it's laurel wilt. We sent the bark that I scraped off, we sent it into the lab over at A&M, and they tested it and said, yeah, it's laurel wilt. So it doesn't matter, the tree's still dead, it's not coming back. So I mean, unless if you see it, you can be pretty sure that's what it is. And it's another one of those things where it's not really much you can do about it. You can just do what you can. Don't do any of the stuff on here to try to keep the tree as healthy as possible. And then it's up to Mother Nature to water it, because I mean a huge oak tree or whatever, huge pine tree, you can't water that thing enough out of your water hose to keep that thing alive. It's just up to Mother Nature to keep everything else healthy. So just you don't do the stuff that's going to cause it to be unhealthy. All right, and that's it.
Yeah. Speaking of that piece of paper right there, you said a while ago about the birdhouse with the nail. Is it too late if you take it out now and?
Yeah, if you pull it out, then the tree's it's gonna try to heal that area up.
Okay. I just feel bad that I've done that.
Cedar trees, and those aren't good to have around your other trees, are they?
It just kind of depends on what you want. I mean, some people like cedar trees so the birds have some food to eat on.
Well, we have some that's growing wild.
For me, a cedar tree here and there is okay, but cedar trees are kind of like yopon. They suck a lot of water out of the ground. And cedar trees are highly flammable, so if a wildfire comes through, and if the flames are high enough or the branches are low enough, that tree is just going to torch out. So I definitely wouldn't have one right next to my house. If I had 10, 20, 100 acres, whatever, one here and there, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But if you have a lot of cedar trees and you're trying to get your post oaks to do better, your pine trees to do better, they're sucking a lot of water out of the ground if those trees that you want to do better.
We've had a lot of them out and used them for fence posts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I didn't mention, post oaks, and if y'all don't know what post oak are, it's the one that has the leaf that looks like a cross.
Yeah.
So post oaks, for some reason, they don't seem to handle root disturbance and root compaction as well as other oak trees. You know, like live oaks, you can just about do whatever you want to. Those things are gonna live. Red oaks, you know, they can handle, you know, up to a point, they can handle some root disturbance. But post oak, I mean, you just about pull a piece of machinery up and look at it and then drive off, and it's gonna freak out. It's gonna stress out.
Oh my God.
Hypoxian is probably gonna hit it. So any kind of, definitely if you have, if the tree you're wanting to save and keep is a big post oak, and that thing has been there, you know, for a couple of 100 years, and you know, great grandma swaying on it when she was a kid. If you have to put a new water line or something in, definitely on that go as far out from that tree as you can, because if you get in, you know, 30 feet from the trunk on that thing and nick some roots, it's probably gonna freak out on you.
Right, that number down. They call